When you think of solution architecture or maybe enterprise architecture, the first artifact that pops up in your mind is probably diagrams. And there are very different flavors, starting with low-level technical diagrams showing the data flow within a system, to solution architecture diagrams showing end-to-end process flows across different systems, usually within one domain, like the SAP ecosystem, to high-level business capability maps used in enterprise architecture. So you see there are plenty of diagrams and also a lot of tools on the market supporting the drawing and the management of these diagrams, like Sublina X, which I personally like, but nevertheless there is still a gap. And if you're following my OpenClaw video series, then you have already seen one of those diagrams, which is a fancy and simplified graphic, big picture you can use if you have a mixed audience. Let's say you have IT and business in one round and you want to communicate a concept, an idea, let's say at the kickoff of a project, and the tools on the market usually deliver very low-key diagrams. But what you see right here, this is more marketing-like. That is something where I see the benefit of AI, which can then generate the diagram for us in the best case. And maybe during the video series, you ask yourself, okay, how did this guy really generate this perfect, nice diagram with AI tools? And the answer is very simple: I didn't. Because by that point in time, there was no tool available on the market which could really generate these complex diagrams. You see with the different colored arrows that we have 3 to 4 different sub-processes here, because they use shared components. So I wanted to have that in one big picture. But describing which component talks to which is kind of tricky. And let me show you how I tackled that with Nano Banana. That is the image generation model triggered from Google Gemini. And in my first try, I used a verbal description here, and I really told it sentence by sentence in my prompt how to build the diagram. And from a content perspective, I would say all the information to create the diagram should be in here, and I double checked that. But nevertheless, when we look into the result, we still see that there are some strange elements in here. For example, there is an orange arrow coming out of the Fritzbox from like nowhere, talking with a Paprika app. That is definitely not according to the process description. Then this label here should actually go up here. It's a little bit misleading, I would say. Then Google Assistant should also not add items to WhatsApp. That also doesn't make sense. So it's, I would say, an 80% version of what I had requested. In a second try, I created a much more structured prompt, because I thought then it would be clearer and less distracting for Nano Banana to interpret what I want. So I started with an area description here saying, okay, I have my local area network, I have cloud, and I have the remaining area. Then in the second section, I described the components, everything that will be placed on my diagram with an icon, all the systems, and also the human I placed there. And then in the last section here, I describe referring to these identifiers here, which system connects to which other and what the data flow looks like. And then when we look into the result picture here, then we see that the result is even worse. For example, OpenRouter here sent some meal planning instructions with no further request. There is a blue arrow going up here, but that doesn't seem to be part of this magenta colored process here. Then it's sending something to WhatsApp and transmitting instructions to OpenClaw, so that all doesn't really make sense. So after a lot of playing around and trial and error, I decided to go with Photoshop to take the diagram that was closest to my vision. And then in Photoshop, you see that I adjusted the rest, and that was okay for this single case. But it was definitely far from best practice, I would say. Also, if you're not familiar with Photoshop or other tools that can fix your image, that could become a problem. Then think about changes. Whenever you have a change in your architecture, you're starting all over again. And I would say that's really nothing I can recommend to use on a on a regular basis. Then GPT-Images 2.0 was released by OpenAI last week, and I thought, hey, that looks very nice, because the marketing promise here is that it can generate perfect complex graphics, and especially it's good at producing graphics with very few or no typos. And I thought, okay, perfect, let's try the diagram generation once again. So I subscribed to the Plus version of OpenAI's ChatGPT. If you have the free version, you can generate up to 2 images with GPT-Images 2.0 per day, which is kind of nothing. So I went with a Plus version, and you also need to make sure that you switch on the thinking mode here, at least standard, to really get well elaborated diagrams or pictures. And then you can see that I copy and pasted the prompt I had previously used for Gemini. I even made it more structured by splitting the sub-processes down here. And within the processes, I started with a numbering to make it even clearer what the sequence of the process looks like. And then when you hit the generate button, it really takes some minutes and you see the thinking process. And that was my first result. I would say the result already looks very good, but we are still far from 100% from perfect. You see, for example, that you have here the Paprika app connecting to OpenClaw again, which is not right. That should actually be an arrow around here connecting to the Paprika backend. Then you have strange things like this orange arrow here connecting with the other one, with the magenta one. So it was clear that needs some improvement. And I realized that there was one critical part in my prompt saying OpenClaw in the notebook should be in the center of the picture, and that made probably GPT think that arrows need to connect there. So I thought, okay, let's make it clearer and say arrows do usually bypass OpenClaw if it is not explicitly stated that there is a data flow from or to A, and A is OpenClaw again. And you can see that the result was still not perfect here. So I started with correction prompts. You see here I had 4 corrections, and the problem is, first of all, that it does not conduct all the corrections. So if you give it 4, then it does 2, maybe 3 of them. The other problem, even worse, it would change elements which were already right in the graphic before. And even if you add here, do not change anything else in the graphic, it will just be ignored. So it became some back and forth. I stopped it here saying, okay, that is not usable in practice. So eventually I came up with the idea of working with a pseudo-notation. Means that I still use my structured prompt format. I have my creation rules up here, my visual style reference, and then the definition of areas and components. But when it now comes to the connections between nodes, I said, okay, this is my fixed format here, source node, target node, arrow at the head, tail, both, or none, which means basically just draw a line from one component to the other without an arrow, and then a caption. And then it reads like, okay, from human A, draw a line to Google Nest Speaker. It has an arrow which is at the head, and the label is, hey Google, add beer and toilet paper to my shopping list. And I created all the connections like that. So it is super clear you need to draw it like this. And interestingly, the very first try already worked. I really like the result because it is not just correct from a formal perspective, it is also very nicely drawn, proportions and dimensions. And whenever now my architecture changes, I can just adjust my prompt, send it once again, and then almost rely on that it will produce a correct diagram once again. And some of you might now say, okay, this pseudo notation is now very close to real notations. Let's say a mermaid here. When we look into the documentation, you see that you also have kind of an area here, which is called a group. You have services, that is our components. You have the connectors. But I still see a big difference here, and that is when I want to go with Mermaid with a perfect syntax, I need to look up everything. If I build a notation myself, I can do it intuitively. I can also add new notation elements as I go along without checking a documentation, without checking for formal correctness according to this Mermaid standard. And that is for me already a big benefit. And the other big benefit that I see, that is the design aspect. I already said that the tools at the market usually have low-key styles. And then here with just one prompt, I modified our previous architecture. I said, give this picture a bright and more serious style, like Google Marketing would design it. And that is already my result. So plenty of room to play, and I think very beneficial for everybody who needs that on a daily basis to do architecture work and communicate designs. So last but not least, I will add a link to my prompt template in the description of this video. And of course, if you like this kind of content, feel free to subscribe to my channel.